If Donald Trump gets his way, Todd Blanche will be the next Attorney General of the United States. And it has to do with an L word. An L word is the reason that that will be the case. And it is not knowledge of the law. It is loyalty. And loyalty has come into view as the most important thing in the Trump administration lately. Something Donald Trump demands in the utmost fashion from every single Republican. And he's not getting it. And it's the reason that he's lashing out and causing those Republicans who are finally finding a bit of daylight between them and Trump, not because they have a conscience, but because they have a grievance. It is why those Republicans are now moving to reject Todd Blanche. It is why Republicans do not think he will be confirmed and why Donald Trump is losing his mind. We are going to get into it all, the Trump freakout, and so much more. But I just want to start with a little context of how unqualified this man is, because besides the fact that he wants to set up the weaponization fund or that he led the cover-up of the Epstein files, his failure as a lawyer should be enough to disqualify him. It's where I want to start before we get to Trump going nuclear and threatening his whole party.
I have the strong suspicion that in Todd Blanche's audition, he got the part when he said this.
As to whether or not I want this job, I did not ask for this job. I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. And if President Trump chooses to keep me as acting, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate me, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and I go back to being the DAG, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir.
I don't know that I've ever seen anyone more afraid in front of a Justice Department microphone. I mean, he sounded kind of terrified there, but I love you, sir. That was the moment. That was Todd Blanche's audition moment that got him the job, because that was the moment when Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, now is acting attorney general, and as of late last night, Donald Trump's nominee to be the next Senate-confirmed attorney general. That was Todd Blanche saying to Donald Trump, I will do anything for you. I mean anything. That was Todd Blanche debasing himself publicly in his audition for a Trump cabinet post more desperately than anyone else in Trump world who has ever engaged in the process of publicly begging for a job from Donald Trump. Republican senators confirmed Todd Blanche in his first Senate confirmation proceeding as Deputy Attorney General. Todd Blanche did not do so well in the nonpartisan evaluation he submitted to in a Manhattan courtroom, where he defended Donald Trump against 34 charges of business fraud in Donald Trump's scheme to pay off the porn star Stormy Daniels, to buy her silence about her very brief encounter with Donald Trump in a hotel room when Donald Trump's third and current wife was home with their 4-month-old baby. Stormy Daniels testified under oath to that jury of New Yorkers who believed her. Donald Trump did not testify in his own defense. That left his defense in the very weak hands of Todd Blanche, who managed to get Donald Trump 34 guilty verdicts from that jury, who decided beyond a reasonable doubt that Stormy Daniels was telling them the truth and Todd Blanche was not telling them the truth, and that Donald Trump was, in fact, very, very, very guilty. So Stormy Daniels was more credible with that jury than Todd Blanche.
Todd Blanche is an idiot. He's a goober. He is a bad lawyer, because Donald Trump doesn't hire good lawyers, because good lawyers don't work for Donald Trump. You have to be stupid as a lawyer, actually, to associate yourself with that criminal. Lawyers work to protect their clients and protect themselves, and you wouldn't work alongside the man who brings litigation and has the shit touch. Anything Donald Trump touches turns to lawsuits and jail time and bankruptcy, so you just wouldn't do that. And Todd Blanche did, because he's not a smart guy and he's not a good lawyer. And that alone should disqualify him from being the Attorney General of the United States. But that is not the reason Republicans are speaking out. Again, they have not grown a conscience about Todd Blanche, but instead a grievance. One Republican in particular, and that is Thom Tillis, who Donald Trump is going to war with. Senator Tillis is a loser. Trump attacks GOP senator over Todd Blanche January 6th ultimatum. Donald Trump railed against Senator Thom Tillis on an Air Force One interview on Friday after a reporter asked the president about Tillis's comments regarding acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Trump said this week that he would nominate Blanche to be approved by the Senate for the position vacated by former Attorney General Pam Bondi. While traveling to Wisconsin to discuss the economy with the state's farmers, a reporter asked Trump, Senator Tillis said he won't support Todd Blanche's confirmation unless Todd Blanche condemns January 6th. Do you have a reaction to that? Senator Tillis is a loser, quite frankly, Trump exclaimed. That's why he didn't run. He didn't run because I wouldn't support him. He's just an angry man, and he's not going to be a senator any longer. He wasn't respected in the Senate. He fought a lot of people. He fought Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth turned out to be a gem. A gem? Huh, that's how we're describing Hegseth. The president continued, quite frankly, no, Senator Tillis is a loser, stone cold, he's an angry man because he was forced to leave the Senate because I wouldn't support him and he quit. This is an important note. Donald Trump thinks Thom Tillis quit and he continues to say that. Okay, so I'm cutting off the reading of Trump quotes there just because we do not need to endure any more Donald Trump. But it is an important note that Donald Trump at first did think Thom Tillis quit. You know, it goes back to this interview that he did with Laura Ingraham, in which she said, Thom Tillis, no longer da-da-da, and Trump goes, yeah, he quit, he's not a senator anymore. And she said, no, Mr. President, he's still a senator, he's just not running for re-election. And honestly, I think Donald Trump is stupid enough to believe that if you're not running for re-election, that you just don't exist anymore, that you're just gone, that you retired, that you left. Thom Tillis retiring meant that he was retiring and not running for re-election, not that he had left. Yes, Donald Trump is that stupid to not understand the difference. And so he got in a fight with the guy. And now, like I said before, this is not the conscience of Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis did not vote to impeach Donald Trump after January 6th. In that moment, so I can promise you his beef is not with January 6th. His quabble is not with January 6th. It should be, but it's not. It's with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump continuing to attack him and continuing to dig his heels in will be doing him no favors whatsoever. This is only going to get worse for the slush fund and for the chance of Thom Tillis voting for Todd Blanche. You saw John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, asked about whether he thought Blanche would be confirmed, and he said, we'll have to see. We're not sure. We don't know yet. That is not the response you usually get from a Senate Majority Leader with a president in power looking to put someone in his cabinet. You get, it's going to be great, and they're wonderful, and I love them, and they have my full support. Quite frankly, they're fantastic. That is what you would usually hear. But we are not in a usual environment, and especially for Donald Trump, who is floundering right now. Because it's not just Todd Blanche who's an idiot, it's all of his DOJ. And it's causing him a lot of problems, as Rachel Maddow broke down right here.
Hey, do you remember this little guy? His name is Greg Bovino. He led Donald Trump's chaotic, violent, inept paramilitary invasions of multiple U.S. cities until he was fired a couple of months ago. Mr. Bovino has been spending his retirement lamenting that he was not able to achieve his personal dream of deporting nearly a third of the U.S. population. He's also posted photos like this one on social media. He posted that on social media. He posted that photo just before jetting off to a white supremacist conference in Portugal this weekend. He was the special guest at a gathering of European far right politicians and activists who advocate for making Europe more white. Bovino appeared before a giant photo of himself in the 1930s German-style greatcoat he apparently made for himself to wear on the job. He told the assembled fascists in Portugal that the United States and Europe have, quote, the same problems and the same solutions. Last fall, when that tiny terror was leading the Trump administration's attack on Chicago, Trump's federal prosecutors, you might remember, they charged a local Chicago man, a Chicago carpenter, with plotting to kill Greg Bovino. Trump's DOJ said that this man had put out a hit on Greg Bovino, had offered cash to anybody who would kill him. Bovino said it was just more evidence of how terrible things are in terrible Chicago. He called the city a war zone. But, interestingly enough, that case immediately fell completely apart after multiple court rulings that prosecutors were trying to say stuff in court about the defendant that they had no evidence to back up. The jury in the case proceeded to acquit the defendant in less than 3 hours. That pitiful, failed case was run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois in Chicago. The case just fell apart completely, which is important to know because everything is falling apart in that particular U.S. Attorney's Office right now. At the center of the collapse is the office's case against the so-called Broadview Six. Federal prosecutors initially indicted 6 people for protesting outside the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. They charged them with felony conspiracy. But then things started going wrong quickly. They dropped the charges quickly against 2 of the defendants. Then they pared back some of the charges against the remaining 4. That made defense attorneys start to wonder what was going on. Defense attorneys demanded to see the grand jury transcripts, which would show how prosecutors got a grand jury to indict these defendants in the first place. Rather than turn over those transcripts, the U.S. Attorney's Office instead just dropped the remaining felony charge altogether, saying, okay, now you don't need to see the grand jury stuff, right? The defense attorneys at that point could have just celebrated having all the charges dropped, but they decided they really wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. The judge eventually agreed with the defense attorney's requests, and she ordered prosecutors to hand over the grand jury transcripts. It was quickly clear why they'd been trying to keep them hidden. Upon reviewing those transcripts, the judge said, quote, "I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of grand jury transcripts. I have never seen the types of prosecutorial behavior before a grand jury that I saw in those transcripts." She accused the U.S. Attorney's Office not just of all that misbehavior, but of trying to hide that misbehavior from her by initially giving her a redacted version of the transcripts that hid the worst stuff that they had done. Well, upon getting dressed down by the judge that way, the U.S. Attorney's Office then dropped all the charges, all the felonies, all the misdemeanors. And the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in that city has been flailing ever since, saying he wasn't personally aware of any of the misconduct, saying he took action as soon as he heard about it. He's announcing sweeping new reforms to his office. But against his denials, one of the Broadview Six defense attorneys, a man named Chris Parenti, says the U.S. attorney himself is a big part of the problem here. Parenti accuses the U.S. attorney of having had contact with the grand jurors himself. If true, that's basically a catastrophe for that federal prosecutor's office. The U.S. Justice Department under Donald Trump has cratered. It's basically gone. But in Chicago specifically, what's going on there right now could result in potentially one of the biggest federal prosecution scandals ever in the history of this country.
This is a big issue for Donald Trump, and he can attack Republicans as much as he wants, but alienating himself further will not be doing him any favors, and we are certainly going to enjoy watching every second of it. And if you want to as well, because we're going to have a lot of fun, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.